What's up, brothers in Anarchy? This is Alex and Graham with another episode of Adventures and Healing. This week, you won't believe it, we have Bob Podolsky on our show. Bob is the author of a revolutionary book called Flourish, in which he explains the Octalogue, which is a non-hierarchical way to organize human beings. Very interesting stuff. Find more about him in the description below. Also, if you want to support our show, the links will be in the description. Check it out and enjoy the conversation.
You know, there are people like Mark Stevens who talk about the illegitimacy of the law. And one way of dealing with it is you go into court and you challenge jurisdiction right up front before you even take the oath or make a plea. Unfortunately, you're still at the mercy of the judge when you do that, because the judge can say, that's a frivolous argument.
Challenge the jurisdiction means saying you don't have any legitimacy to make a ruling over me?
Right.
Okay.
Right. The most concise way of putting it is to challenge jurisdiction by asking the question, do you have any factual evidence whatsoever that your law that you're attempting to enforce applies to me? And in fact, there is no such thing as factual evidence to that, because all of the evidence is things people wrote down, and that has long since been recognized as opinion written on paper, or simply as the scribblings of a bureaucrat legislator.
There's no contract that this person signed that said, I give you right to rule over
No
me.
consent. No consent.
Or to make laws, about my non-aggressive behavior.
Exactly. Exactly. And in fact, that also, applies to aggressive behaviors. There is no factual evidence. By factual, factual is like science. If something's factual, you can demonstrate it. Okay, show me the demonstration that you have authority over me. Well, I've got a piece of paper that says so. Well, that's not factual evidence, that's just hearsay or opinion. And these guys keep maintaining that if they write an opinion down, that makes it law. That means you have to obey. What? You write something down and I have to obey? How about I write something down and you have to obey? What gives you more right to do that than me? Oh, well, we got elected. So what? Yeah. I have neighbors and friends. I could get them here as my supporters. Well, we're a majority. What if I had the majority? Would that give me the right to rule you? No, it doesn't. If you understand what a cartel is a shared monopoly. And a cartel has only two purposes. One is to maximize the members' profits, and the other is to maintain the monopoly status of the group. That's all they care about. They don't have any morality, they don't have any ethics. All they care about is those two things. Well, that's why cartels always contract with governments to support their laws or rules. So if I have enough people behind me and enough money behind me, I can hire some legislators to enforce my rules.
Which in itself is a cartel, the government.
Yes, it's a little different kind of cartel, but It is a cartel. Every government is a cartel, and there are cartels within cartels, and cartels comprised of cartels. The European Union is a cartel. The United States is a cartel. Have either of you ever worked for government?
Work for government?
Have you?
No.
No. Well, when you work for government, you find out pretty quick the status in that society is based on how many people report to you. The more people report to you, the higher your status and the higher rank you obtain, either in civil service or through elections, and the more money you make. So people want to expand their realms or domains when they work in government.
Their fiefdom.
Yeah, so they're perfectly happy. Oh, You want some laws made for your benefit? Great, grease my wheels, pay for my publicity and whatnot around my election, and we'll do whatever you want. And they do. That's how the government works.
And it's called lobbyism, and everybody knows it's going on.
Yes, it is publicly recognized bribery that has been legitimized, just like all the other terrible things that have been legitimized by scribbles on pieces of paper.
Okay, so you mentioned ethics earlier, and I kind of want to get into that because I thought it was really interesting when I heard you first speak about that at the Acapulco. Your 4 values of ethics and then the 4 byproducts of those values. So the values are truth, awareness, love, and creativity.
Yes.
And the byproducts of that are peace, prosperity, happiness, and freedom.
Yes.
And to me that was very interesting to have a philosophy that values happiness not as a ultimate goal but simply as a byproduct of other values.
That's partly accurate, mostly accurate, but the one piece that is missing from that is the fact that when you make happiness the highest priority, if you substituted happiness, say, for truth, you wind up unhappy. People who set happiness as their highest priority are miserable. And there are good reasons for it. One can go into that. I mean, I prefer not to take the time to go into those details for this conversation, but it's pretty straightforward to show that if the thing you want is happiness, the fact that you're wanting it, in effect, says you don't have it. And you wind up remaining that way by holding that, I want this, I want this. Well, why don't you have it? I want it. Putting myself in the posture of wanting, I mean, sometimes the word wanting literally means lacking. He's wanting. Well, I'm wanting freedom. Too bad, can't have it. You're going to be less free because you're wanting. Whereas seeking truth, awareness, love, and creativity works. If you seek those and you make those your highest priorities, you wind up with more of them. That's a valid ethic, providing the belief system is properly framed, which is simply that an act is good if it increases one of those 4, which incidentally, it can only increase all of them or none of them. If it increases any of them, they all increase. But for the purposes of definition, if an act increases one of them without limiting or diminishing any of those for anyone, it's an ethical act. And that is consistent and it works. If you live by that, you get more and more of what you really want, and incidentally, you get happiness and freedom and prosperity and so forth, and other benefits. So, for those who are unfamiliar, let me quickly define what an octalogue is. It's a group of 7 to 9 people. It doesn't start out 7 to 9 people. It starts out with one person with an important idea, and he then brings other people into the group. But the group isn't going to exceed 9 people, except there are some very, very detailed ways of stretching that boundary a little bit. But basically, you're looking at 7 to 9 people who commit to an ethical purpose, a shared purpose. And they decide they're going to make their decisions unanimously. It takes a little learning. But with only typically 8 people in the group, you don't need to pass a talking stick around. You can just have a conversation like we're having a conversation. So it's a small enough group that the communication works and the number of relationships within the group is manageable. Okay, here am I with, say, 7 other people. Well, I can handle 7 close relationships. I would not be able to handle 70 close relationships. So I want to limit the size of the group, and that makes it possible to have really good decisions. anyone in the group can veto a decision that they think would be unethical. Oh, well, you're not going along with that, we're going to discuss it. And you discuss it until you reach unanimity. Then there are all kinds of practice you can do to learn how to do that if it's difficult. The other thing is, the people in the group agree to give each other feedback. And not only to offer feedback, but to listen to the feedback given to them. That's the hard part of the whole thing. That is the hardest part. And it is based on that experience that we've decided to add the soul bonding component to the definition of the Octalogue. That you have to have, if not soul bonding per se, you have to have some mechanism whereby people can hear the feedback without their defenses getting in the way. And the defenses are always characterological. They go back to what did you experience as a child when you were little, before the age of 5. Mostly before the age of 5. There are a few exceptions. But soul bonding is a communication protocol, if you will. It is a set of techniques that go together whereby people can identify the elements of their own character structure and grow out of them, in effect. I can learn to lower my defenses in order to hear things and to see things that I was unable to hear and see while I still had those defenses in place, because we're talking about the filters that you mentioned. The filtering of information goes through this stuff that we get conditioned with early on, and we become incapable under ordinary circumstances of seeing and hearing what's right in front of us. Well, we have those things operating all the time through our character structure, the set of defenses that we use to protect ourselves when we're little. And as infants and toddlers, we need those defenses because our parents aren't that skilled at managing us, if you will, when we're little, and the parents are unskilled at that. They're likely to do things to us to get us to control us that are permanently damaging. Mm-hmm. But they don't know that. They do it unwittingly, but I've never met someone who did not have a character structure, ever, because our culture is such as it is. So the soul bonding is drawn from 6 different psychotherapeutic disciplines that were developed for clinical work. And what I've done is that I've divorced those from the clinical practice and incorporated it into an educational practice. Of course, the real education happens at the subconscious level, which is kind of tricky. Okay, we're going to do education, but you may or may not know at any given moment that your subconscious is being educated. Okay, it works, and it sets us free. It sets us free from the mental traps that we get set up in when we're very little. And there are typically five kinds of early mental traps that people get into, 5 prototypical or, what's the word for it, archetypal character structures. But we learn to recognize those. Oh, wow, cool. Now we can do something about it. So what I've done is I've introduced some of that know-how into the Octalogue. And I'm basically telling people, if you want to form an Octalogue, you've got 5 ways that people in your group can sabotage what you're doing. It would be a good idea to have someone available who can sort things out for you when you run into conflicts, because the conflicts are almost always of characterological origin. And so if you have someone there who knows the soul bonding, not even in its entirety, but just parts of it, who can say, oh, I know what's going on here. We're having this conflict because we have a characterological conflict. We've got someone in the room with a character structure that's undermining our process. Let's help them. Let's get them over that. We can do this. So the whole soul bonding technology has become part of the Octalogue lore.
Interesting. And then the Octalogue is used to achieve purposes and like help people organize without the hierarchy?
Yes, it's non-hierarchic. Think about it, if I'm in a group where I can veto any decision and anyone else in the group can veto any decision, we're not in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
In a hierarchy, there's always a boss who calls the shots. So it's non-hierarchic, in some ways very egalitarian, though not in the socialist or communist way, quite the contrary. And of course, if you have a project that takes more than 8 people, you need a bigger group. Well, guess what? You can form ethical contracts between octalogues to form a bigger group, which we call a holomat. That's short for holotropic matrix. And basically is a group where all of the useful information ideally is available everywhere in the organization. That's why it's holotropic. A holograph contains information uniformly, more or less. In other words, do either of you have any familiarity with how an actual holograph is formed? Is that part of your experience or not?
I know it's kind of, well, the information about the whole hologram is contained within each cell of the hologram.
Right, right. To put it in real practical terms, if I want to make a holographic image, I take a beam of photons and I split it. And I use half of that beam to illuminate the thing I'm taking a holographic picture of. And I bounce the other half off of another mirror and get a different image from that one. And then these two are put together on, typically on what was a photographic plate. Nowadays there are sensors they can use, like photographic sensors in a camera instead of a photographic plate. But think about it as a piece of film. And you look at the image, you hold up the piece of film, and it's just a blur. You don't see an image until you shine a laser through it. And now you get an image from the laser interacting with this thing, and it's a three-dimensional image. You move your head like this, and you see different sides of the object.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a microphone. I can see it from over here. I can see it from over here. I can get a three-dimensional image of the object in that way. But if I take that piece of plastic that's the plate, and I cut it in half and do the same projection with it, I get the same image, even though I've taken half of that thing away. It's not quite as clear an image. And if I do it in half again, so I'm looking at a quarter of the original piece, same thing. I lose some of the integrity of the image, but the image remains there, the whole image. It's not like I cut the image in half.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work that way. So when I say something is holotropic, I mean it is tending toward that kind of distribution of information. I believe that the universe is a holographic phenomenon, and that the brain is a quantum mechanical machine that can interact with that holographic universe. And this is how we get new information that's valuable. And we have a process in the Octalogue called amplification, where we literally amplify creativity by having a group meditation that taps into the quantum mechanical universe. Now, I can't prove that that mechanism that I just described is really what's happening, but it might as well be, because it works.
Something's happening.
Something's happening, and it works as if we were able, as a group, to tap into a vast resource of information and download new information. There is the risk, we don't know when we do that if the information we are downloading is true or false, but science tells us how to test for that. And so we can then test the information and say, it's true or it's not true.
But that process is proven to be very helpful.
Oh, yeah. Very helpful. Yeah, what
Can you
happened?
describe it a little bit?
Well, 8 people typically sit elbow to elbow in a circle. And depending on the design of the chairs, we may be holding hands, or we may have our arms over each other's shoulders. And we visualize certain things. We visualize a flow of energy around the circle. We visualize an energy field in the shape of a torus with ourselves inside
Nice.
the donut. And so, if we're sitting inside a torus, and the torus is big enough, there will be a column of energy in front of us, which we picture as rising out of the ground and spreading out in the quantum universe, and then coming back around and circulating. We picture that. Meanwhile, we're breathing in time with each other, and we have some rules that we follow in our communication. And the rules are simple. When you get a new idea that you haven't had before, the first time it occurs to you, you mentally push it away. No, I'm not going to say that. But if the same idea comes back a second time, we oblige ourselves to share it with the group, no matter how strange, weird, bizarre, or obscene the idea happens to be. And it turns out that some of the strangest ideas have the most information in them when you later examine them. And of course, we record the session because frequently we're going to such an altered state that when we come out of it, we don't remember what was said, even if we said it. But we record it. Later, when we're not in that state, we play it back and examine each submission. And amazing things come out of that. Hugely amazing things. It's a very synergistic process.